So before people go away entirely, we have a bit here at the end where we have an opportunity for more open discussion in the group, which can certainly include all of the wonderful speakers that we've had, who I believe are all still in the room, who may be able to opine on things. And we would love to hear what people who have listened to these and who have done their own work in any of these machine learning, AI kind of related areas might have thoughts on things. But perhaps as a provocation, and this is somewhat self-interested that I'm saying this, come to my talk tomorrow, but I'm going to talk some about, to put it simply, what do I think are the ethical and legal obligations that we should have surrounding AI? How is it going to shape societies in the future? How is it going to shape our experiences as developers of code and software systems? And I'm sure that many people in the room have already worked with these things. They've given thought to what's going to be the future, what's going to change as a consequence of these new technologies existing, which many of the speakers spoke about. That doesn't have to be the only thing you can ask questions about. Anything that pertains to any of the earlier talks or just general thoughts in the area, we would love to hear what everyone thinks about such things. So please, someone has to raise their hand.
Yeah, I would say the part that really I've been thinking about quite a bit with generative AI is whether it really is this unique, new, scary thing that we need to figure out the ethics about, or is it that for the last 20 to 30 years, actually the tech companies and startups have been deeply unethical and we just didn't do anything about it. And this is just a variation of what they've been doing for really quite a long time. And we hear this before as well, is that there's this almost like a playbook. Is, hi, I'm going to save the world. I'm VC funded and I'm from an elite university. And right when you hear those three things, you should be really worried. So that's my maybe provocation to start with.
It's a wonderful provocation. Is there anything new in AI? I mean, you've all come to these talks that have this general theme of AI. Presumably somebody thinks that something's new. Perhaps you can articulate what it is you think that is happening in the world with this? Or is it a cynical ploy, as my friend Noah thinks?
Hi. I'd agree, it's a cynical ploy. I have a question for you, though. If there were a philosopher in the room, and let's just remember, when we think about philosophy, that's 2,500 years in the Western tradition, and there are other traditions around the world that I can think of that have a highly developed ethical history and legacy and academic thought. And yet, whenever I come to software development conferences and I hear the word ethics and I watch talks, it's like the top 10 things you need to know about not doing evil with AI and things like that. And I kind of groan because there is this legacy in our culture, in our cultures around the world of ethics. And yet I see there's a disconnect between that and what's happening in AI. Now, is that because the philosophy is irrelevant? Or is it because the people who are doing AI just don't know about it, and really they ought to? I'd be interested in your opinion.
It's the second thing. I do think that there's a whole lot of this is just me opining, and I really want to get other people to say things, but I really do think that, as with most technological topics that have developed new possibilities, in the last 250 years or so, have been always firstly motivated by this, sort of innovation for its own sake, the possibility of profit out of some particular technological change before the actual social implications are considered. And I mean, this is definitely calling back very much to what Noah said as well, that I think that as societies, we should try to think about better motivations and better social structures for the developments of these technologies. And as Nick hints, I actually have a doctorate in philosophy, so I have that background. But I really want somebody else to talk on this mic, though. In fact, I'm going to give it to somebody else who has to talk.
So I'm going to say something. Right. So I generally think that generative AI is really a very, very cool thing. Regarding the question of whether it actually creates something new, I'm not so sure. I think it recombines existing things to create new things, but it doesn't really do any kind of invention. It's not creative in the original sense. It doesn't, there's no spark of innovation in there. If you ask an LLM a certain question, it may feel or look like it's creating something that's intelligent, in quotes. But if you look at it really from the perspective of the math that's going on behind it, there's absolutely no innovation in there. There can't be, because there might be some randomization at certain points, but that's about it. So I think we still have a very, very long way to go to reach something that is has general kind of intelligence, that actually takes things beyond just basically reproducing things in new ways, recombining images, for example, creating images out of things that the LLM has seen. So that's going to be a long way ahead. What it can do, though, is that, and that's I think that's a very strong point, it can actually combine things in new ways that we haven't seen before. And it can understand, in quotes again, things that we see in reality that we as humans may not be able to grasp as quickly as an LLM can. Or, if you go beyond language models, you can also look at image processing models. And I think that's a very, very interesting kind of perspective to take on.
Hi. Yeah, I'm actually just wondering what AI will deliver for the human race. Nothing, says someone. There was a conversation or a discussion in New Scientist recently about the advantages of AI, and there was a lot of hope about how AI could, for example, reveal the lies in public statements by various individuals, and how this would be a wonderful thing. But I pointed out that in actual fact, when lies are discovered, people don't seem to care anyway. They just carry on and believe them. So, I mean, there's certainly a lot of promise in artificial intelligence, but what is it actually delivering that really benefits us?
All right. I think there are two important aspects of, well, many important ones you guys told. I want to focus on two of them. One, I think the innovation around AI, the hype, is pretty much anything that is so perceived as magic, it becomes like this, magic, and you take it for granted. That's the kind of the risk with AI. It seems so intelligent that the results of it, what's producing, are so convincing that even for people that are engineers, work in the field, data scientists, so for most people that don't have that technological background, it feels really the truth. So how do you communicate that AI can hallucinate as well, just like people? Or, there's no difference between AI lies and human lies, right? That's a hard problem, one. The second one is around, and by the way, I agree with Noah that reducing the margin of profit around AI I don't think solves the problem, but it gives a fair opportunity to everyone. So if we with open source can create models that are easily shippable and usable for everyone, and they're free. You know, people can choose and pick whatever they want, and the intent of creating something because of profit, it you know, invalidates the purpose. The other problem is around regulations. Who would you trust to regulate AI? For sure, I wouldn't trust governments or people that have no idea around what it is, right? So it's a difficult problem. But with every that type of level of innovation, you have to have those discussions no matter what. So, yeah. I don't have a good solution. It's just a comment.
Only partly related to what Fabio said, although he addressed a number of other things that I think are very interesting and we have to think about. But how many people in this room who are, I presume, coders now actively use these AI coding assistants in their daily work? How helpful do you think they are? And how do you find any pitfalls in using them, or you think they're just purely a benefit? But an opinion, somebody just tell me an opinion, please.
So professionally, I'm not a developer. I'm basically into products. I'm a project manager working on digital transformation projects. But every now and then, I am working with data, and I have to understand, maybe I'm doing an API integration just to test some connectivity. And I use Python aggressively. Now, typically, when I used to do this thing earlier, it used to take me some time to understand, go onto Stack, and find my solutions across the community. Today, I use Video Copilot, and bloody hell just gets my job done. I figure it out. It hallucinates, as you say. I throw it in. It throws an error. But the funny thing is, I ask itself to tell me what it went wrong, and trying to learn by itself, it says, okay, I'm sorry, it's very kind. AI is one of the nicest person you would talk to. It tells itself, like, oh yeah, maybe I made this mistake. And in a matter of few minutes, if not more, I'm pretty much written code that helped me solve my problem. Now that is very powerful. And just to add one thing, I heard you guys talk about AI in general, and we keep talking about this artificial intelligence, which is the general intelligence, which is a long way out. But there's this current context, which is the ACI, which is the artificial capability intelligence, which is how capable it makes us. I just want to hear you guys, the speakers and all, talk about it. Like, what do you think are the capabilities we will get from this whole idea of artificial intelligence? Any one of you?
Well, I don't know why I was handed this, but anyway, here we go. So, as you were speaking, something was coming up. 20 years ago, Google sort of arrived, and the skill that you had to learn, rather than having to look up things in actual dead tree encyclopedias and things like that, you had to learn how to use the correct search terms such that Google would produce the best results. And I'd like to answer your question by saying, well, now people are starting to learn, how do I prompt my AI such that it returns the most useful thing for me that I think is useful. Anyway, I was talking to a professor in the US last week, and he was saying there's actually those of his engineering students who are actually experienced in engineering were asking the right questions of the AI assistant, as it were, and it was coming back with useful answers. Those who were not as experienced as engineers were asking all sorts of rubbish and getting rubbish back. So your question about what capabilities are we going to have in the future, well, I think that depends on human intelligence and human skills and how we are going to be able to make the best use of the tools that we have. Because clearly, if you're using a prompting mechanism for your coding, you've got a chatbot or something there, and you're asking it the wrong questions because you're naive or you're a beginning coder or something like that, you're going to get not so good answers. And in the future, HAL 9000, you ask him to open the pod bay doors, and he won't do that because you're asking the wrong question. Do you see what I mean? You need to figure out how to use these things, just like all the other technology we've ever used. you need a user manual or you need to get used to it, and then you figure out how best to make use of it. But that's it. It's down to the humans, I think, not the AI.
Another issue, of course, is how to separate AI outputs from other knowledge, because otherwise there's a risk that AI outputs will parse further AI outputs until eventually all human knowledge is based on AI output and bears very little relation to the truth at all. So one important thing is that we do need to be able to label data as the output of artificial intelligence so that it's not used as input to other algorithms.
Just on that point about knowledge, a typical definition for knowledge, for me at least, is that normally you get data, you curate a lot of amount of data, and then you convert that data into information. And that's common with all of us. We do exactly the same thing. We collect, like right now I'm here collecting information, and then I assimilate it, or through osmosis by just sitting next to you guys, I turn that into knowledge that I can then use. And that's exactly what this whole technology is doing right now. It's taking, as you said, it's a human problem. We need to be intelligent, but that data which is going in there is human. So why are we discriminating in a way about that intelligence as compared to us, and why is AGI such a big issue?
But it's not intelligent. It's just a machine. You can't switch off and on a human being. There's a sort of something else going on there. Whereas a machine, I can just reboot it if it goes wrong, switch it off and on again, okay? And the thing is, what Steve said about, we've got AI being trained on AI it's like the photocopying. You remember that from way back when? I used to be a musician, and the parts for musicians would get photocopied, and then the photocopy of the photocopy would be handed out. And in the end, I'd turn up at an orchestral rehearsal with a photocopy of a photocopy of a photocopy of a photocopy of a part, and I couldn't see a thing. And I think it's the same sort of degrading of the information or the message in there. As if you've got an AI trained on AI data, you're just going to get a load of rubbish out of it, really.
Well, yeah, the thing I'm concerned about is that, for example, GPT is well known for what they call its hallucinations, where it brings out statements which are, to any reasonable human being, clearly nonsensical. Now, if those outputs are treated as valid inputs by further AIs, and then they base their outputs on that nonsense, things are just going to get worse and worse and worse.
There's another aspect too. You can always block Nicholas, the AI, on Twitter or whatever outlet. I know. But the problem of data, where does the data come from, the validity of data, how it was curated, parsed, and whatever. It's the same for AI and for humans. The problem is the scale. All of a sudden, you have the potential of 100,000 AI bots, on social media or creating data and things like this, which was not the same for just human-generated intelligence, right? Which, by the way, is the concept. And there are some companies investing in HGI instead of AGI. It's an inside joke, sorry. But what Stephen is saying is extremely important. How do you, and not only for AI, it's been a problem for a decade or more now with data science and everything else. Like, how do you distinguish a trustful resource that generates data sets from a randomly generated data set? And even with data sets that were generated with all good intent and they were validated and everything, you still have a ton of errors in the data, different shapes and different things, and you need to aggregate data. That was a problem already before. So I think AI it accelerates the community to talk about those problems and come up with governance models and things like this that we can at least mitigate the risk of creating bad data in general. Or bad data, well, people that don't have enough data literacy and computer science background to make up something from that data in general.
What you're saying is it's an education problem, then? It's always an education problem, isn't it? If human beings understood what was going on with the AI. This is your point earlier, Fabio, about it's indistinguishable from magic if you don't understand what's going on behind the scenes. So this is why, you know, it's very important that we make sure that we cultivate education that empowers people and they get the skills that they need, not only coding skills, but the nous to be able to walk around an amazing place like this and go, I'm not sure that is ever going to work, but I can see that that thing has potential. And over here, so we're helping people cultivate expertise and discrimination. I mean, as in they discriminate because they have expertise, as in they're, you know, like a wine, a sommelier discriminates, a particular wine is better than and so on. So it's that sort of thing. So yeah, it's an education problem. Funny that.
So one of the things that I have experienced, I wrote a book at the beginning of this year that was called Regular Expressions in AI Coding Assistance, which I think was the first book from a real technical publisher that discussed how useful or what the limitations of these coding assistants that were becoming popular, especially after the release of ChatGPT a couple months before that. But there's been similar systems for a while, and they continue to improve. There's limitations, obviously, in the system. They produce bad code at times, and you kind of have to have, in my mind, a level of knowledge in order to distinguish the good from the bad. There's also other issues, such as Noah suggests, about which ones we want to use, whether they really are produced by good organizations, whether they're honest about the sources of their training data, and a variety of things like that. But even if we can bracket that for a moment, how does one best use these tools as coders? And I've been asked by several entities to do training in this, basically, you know, produce, write a book or do live training or a variety of things. And I've been very resistive to that because, not because I think it's bad. I think, you know, I use one of these tools like every day that I write code, and very often it produces things that are helpful to me. But I have no idea how I would teach somebody to make the right judgments about when to trust it and when to, you know, dispute it or when to disbelieve it. And that's a different kind of judgment than simply how do you write code on your own correctly.
Yeah, that's a perfect segue for a comment I was going to say, which is I also, when Copilot came out, I had access to it before it was publicly released, and I started to use it about a year ago to teach at Duke. And then I actually had a bunch of light bulb moments. One of them was that I need to do much harder things, and that's why I went into Rust. That's why I've tried to do more difficult technical tasks. And then in this fall, I've required students to use generative AI. They're required, they cannot do any assignment that is not generated with generative AI for data engineering. But I also asked them to try multiple tools and to rotate through the tools. And I also teach DevOps the first day of class. So I think that the takeaways for me are that it is obviously a good tool that people will use, but that you need to have a much higher level of difficulty that you ask the people that are learning to go at. So if we use the backflip example, if you were like not doing a backflip, now the generative AI tool is the trampoline, you better be doing a backflip. You better be doing more difficult things. And also the things that nobody wants to do because they're hard, which are DevOps. Nobody wants to write automated tests or set up GitHub actions or do, you know, linting, formatting, code review, all this stuff. It's actually even more important. So I think that's another thing to consider, is that the human skills that are really difficult to really get organizations to adopt are actually dramatically more important, even though they were important before.
Thank you. I think the problems we have with Gen AI are the same problems we had like all the time. It's the same, like the hallucination thing. It's social media. But now we are multiplying the problem like 100 times, and now we need to talk. I think it's the same for the ethical things, and now we need to talk about the identity and the ethics and so on. We haven't been talking about this for a long time, so now you have to deal with it, the scale problem you're talking about.
So maybe a provocative question here to the audience. Where do you actually see real use of AI systems versus all the problems that we've just discussed here? I mean, real actual use that you can do, you can apply AI nowadays. So we've listened here, for example, code generation, right? So the question there is, who checks the code that AI generates? Because it's probably going to have lots of bugs in it, right? Or what if you ask a question to an AI system, who are you going to ask? I mean, which human or expert are you going to ask whether that answer is actually true? And you can trust that answer. So we had lots of these examples here where basically AI was producing something, actually lots of it, also well-formed, with nice grammar and everything, but the facts may not necessarily be correct. So who of you is using AI in production for doing actual things, and what are the ways that you work around these issues? Anyone?
Where I'm using it today. So one example I have is using AI right now for predicting continuous glucose monitoring. That's something that we're using in a company that I advise. And we're actually using several AI models because, look, the way it works is there's about, 67% of world population that has either type 1 or type 2 diabetes. So it's no new story that a lot of them, and it's expensive to get a CGM patch. Those are not cheap, and in some countries it comes through insurance. Your physician has to make you get it. In some countries you can buy it, but the point is it's only valid 14 days. So you have your CGM data for 14 days, but after that you're on your own. You have no idea how to, is your glucose shooting up? Are you hypo? What's going on with you internally? And so what we started doing was using AI to say, can I look ahead? Once you get off the patch, can I use time series and use historical data from your 14 days of your meal log, your activity level, your sleep, your medication? Those are only 4 pillars to a table for tracking anything to do health-wise. And then use that data to correlate the data points and then predict and say, it looks like between 1 and 3 p.m., for example, you are going to your blood sugar is going to drop under 60, which is not healthy for you because you're going into hypo. You might want to grab a high-protein snack. Now, that is extremely valuable insight for anybody who is a diabetic, because they had no clue unless you scan your CGM and then you're like, oh wow, it's going down. But to know that ahead of time as a pattern and a trend is what I'm seeing as a real life use case where it's actually helping with personalized insights. So that's one. In health tech is where I'm seeing some actual usage. I don't know about fintech and other areas. I've seen more hype than real. So.
This is interesting that you're saying this because, I mean, health tech, of course, they take a lot of responsibility on the patients, right? And so if you pass decision making to AI, you potentially have a big issue. I mean, it's basically life and death, right? So, so what is how are you mitigating those risks?
Yeah, so this is, it's one of those things where you can't just use CGM 14 days of historical data to predict what your sugar would look like for the next month. Because you may be on a trip, you may have a heavy lunch or whatever you did the day, right? Because your blood sugar is varying every day. So, and every hour. So I think one of the things is really about educating them that this is, not supposed to be 100%, accurate. We provide a standard deviation. We talk about the accuracy of the model, but it gives you guidance. which is far more, I think, important. What I've heard from some of the patients who use this is actually better than not knowing at all. So this is helping me at least move in the direction. And they're not going to trust everything, but if they see a pattern, that this is your pattern for the next 10 days, and this is when it's happening, I think at least they can take an action, right? So, yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any other
Yeah,
inputs?
so I was going to say a similar example. Like today, I think I use it frequently for my job for coding and stuff, but I have a certain level of guessing, like David said, when it's useful, when I need to run another iteration and things like this. But I think the more we go forward, I think it can provide an impact on those repeatable tasks. Like my wife does provide services, right? She's overwhelmed with texts from potential clients and people that want to know same things, but put in different forms. One of my next to-do things that I need to do for my wife is, get her in front of a bot that can help her from her previous texts and previous behaviors to predict kind of the answers that she's going to give. And I still would like her to review stuff, just read through and send, but most times it's a time saver, right? And I think it can potentially increase the quality of life for people that usually, do those type of things or have predictable behaviors and whatnot. In the meantime, models are going to evolve and they're going to be more precise and stuff. There's another problem though. So what I'm saying, I think it's going to help people with small tasks in their daily life, right? One thing that I find extremely interesting, which is a kind of deviating a little on your question, is how good are the models for non-English speakers or for people with different ethnicities or cultural backgrounds that are not the Occident, right? So I actually had a friend that ran a marketing campaign for an university that were looking at results and found most results are biased towards, white male from, first Occidental culture and stuff. And so they did an experiment retraining the models with, content from other cultures and things like this, and found out way more equality in terms of results and stuff like this. That's another area that I think the more we do those things and models become multicultural and with different type of content, I think it brings more diversity and make them actually better for the specific geographic region and convo of demographics that they are targeting to. Makes sense.
Well, I just want to complement a little bit about the healthcare field because I was working with an hospital 3 years ago about long tumor detection, and I can say that, well, we don't want to replace the doctors. We don't want to leave the decision to the AI between the lie or die. We just want to help the doctors because one of the problems that most of the countries has is there are a few doctors for a huge population, right? So they have a very huge workload, and maybe taking the decision or maybe realizing that this patient can have a tumor, right? In weeks, just a delay in weeks, it could be the lie or the die, right? So we just want to analyze these things, maybe tell the doctor, hey, man, maybe this patient can have a tumor, so can you please review this patient fiercely, right? It's just giving a prioritize of cure of the things. We don't want to replace the doctor, we just want to help. And I think that the AI is doing a good work in this kind of field.
Okay, anyone? Maybe not always Nicholas. So maybe someone from over here.
Sorry. On no. Yeah.
Hello. Okay. So I'd like to agree with what you said. I'm related to some doctors and nurses, and they have a lot of work to do. But I think the point that you raise is a really good one, because what AI is doing there is complementing and amplifying what the human does rather than replace them. And it made me sort of think about the last time I encountered AI as a sort of a user, and that was when I was booking my travel insurance for coming to Dubai, and there was a little chatbot in the corner, and it was like Clippy all over again, and I wanted it to go away. So this is important. We need to think about how not only what are we training the AI to do, but how are we exposing that to the end user as well? Because in the right hands of a doctor who's an expert in the field, this thing can be a life-changing experience because they get to do the things that they need to do without all the stress. But for idiots like me who just want to book a travel insurance, it gets in the way and it's really, really annoying. So there is sort of UX aspects to this as well. But anyway, I'll pass this back to Marc Andre. Sorry for being so talkative.
Yeah, I just wanted to add one more thing to what Nicholas just said, that it's clearly evident what AI is doing in the medical space or even in the military space. But one area where, I mean, I work in the government sector, and one of the areas where we are seeing a massive push of using AI tech is in customer experience. And that is kind of really becoming a very important point of discussion, not only in government, but also in other areas. How exactly can we make the digital experience of everybody using any kind of tool a lot easier? How can we reduce, like somebody mentioned that Amazon was very proud of making the 2.5 click moment. Nowadays, if you go to any kind of government entity and try to use one of our services, you're practically talking about 25, 30 touch points with 1,500 documentations. So a centralized document system, giving these data sets to controlled learning models, and then leveraging that to make the customer experience or the like even the residential person who's living in that country and all, the life experience is something which AI is being used aggressively on. Another area where I feel we could be seeing a lot of changes, tourism, where, like in a sense, if I want to plan something nowadays, I'm leaning on AI to plan my travel and all across. So these are two areas. What earlier was mentioned about making the individual's life easy, I think that's one area where I feel we are all leaning on AI. As a user, as a single individual person, how can I make my JITEX booking easier? Can I get my taxi done? Can I plan my entire trip in and out of Dubai much easier? I think that's where I see also we need a lot of things to be done. So a lot of work.
Okay, so what I hear from the audience is that AI is currently, it's very, very useful as an assistant to help you with smaller tasks, or maybe help with prioritization of certain tasks, or maybe predictions. But you don't put full trust into AI just yet, right? And personally, I think that's actually a good thing, because it's, if you
So I think that we're at about the time that we should wrap up here, but it's a good seed for all the great talks you're going to hear tomorrow, which are going to scare you to death after much of these discussions, I hope. So thank you so much, everybody, for coming, and please come back we're going to open up at 10:30 tomorrow. The talks don't start until, I think, 11, but we'll have, oh, there's a comment back here. I think we have more information. Pawan will add it or something.
Hello. Yeah. Good evening, everyone. This is Chirag Agrawal. I'm the founder at WebCops, which is an IT consulting and services firm. So just to add up what we are discussing so far with the generative AI, we did something very similar where we implemented the AI on the support side, which ultimately actually helped our customer to reduce the support efforts by 50%. So we automated various use cases where we worked towards how we could make it easy for the customers. So I would say it's a weapon And if we use it wisely, we would be able to achieve and deliver the greatest of the greatest results. And we did something something very similar for the government of India, where we did work towards the OCRing of the 50 years old documents. We make it searchable across the different devices. Otherwise, we were very backward into that specific area, and when we were going with the manual process, it was taking kind of forever to deliver or to figure out what we were trying to. So there are numerous use cases where we could optimally utilize AI and make our life easier. That's what I would say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, with that, I think we can end the show. Thank you very much for coming. Hope to see you again tomorrow.